I think we're good to start, Mr. Chair, whenever you're ready.
Okay, a little late, 10:02. I'm calling this meeting of the West Coast Committee together. And would like to recognize that we are on the territorial lands of the Unauthorized First Nations, and to recognize that and to appreciate it. Notice to all the attendees that and delegates that this meeting will be recorded and live streamed on YouTube and regional district website. Next is the approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion to approve, including late items requiring 2/3 majority?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Thank you. So moved. Adoption of the minutes. Item 3, which is the West Coast Committee meeting of June the 1st. And the recommendation is that the minutes of the West Coast Committee meeting held on June 1st, 2020 be received. Do I have a seconder?
Second.
Thank you. Item 4, request for decision and bylaws. And this request for decision is regards to Hazelwood lease renewal request for the Long Beach Airport. Do we have a staff report on this or any recommendations?
Just the lease renewal is based on proposed works that Hazelwood has still in the park and in the area in the next couple of years. Our main concern from the airport standpoint was sewer and water usage, and that seems to be within our capabilities at the moment. So the recommendation was to move forward with that lease renewal.
Okay. So the recommendation is that the West Coast Committee recommend that to the ACRD Board of Directors approve the lease renewal with Hazelwood Construction Services for a 2-year extended period from January 1st, 2021 to December 31st, 2022. Are there any comments or on any of the report? Nothing? Do I have the mover on that?
I will make the recommendation that the West Coast Committee recommend that the ACRD Board of Directors approve the lease renewal with Hazelwood Construction Services for a 2-year extension period from January 1st, 2021 to December 31st, 2022.
Thank you. Seconder?
Second.
Thank you. So moved. Item B under request for decisions with regards to the West Coast Landfill Ocean Legacies Ocean Plastics Recycling Depot Agreement. Any staff comments on that?
Jenny.
Through the chair, we're working with Ocean Legacy and Surfrider. We've been diverting the rope and netting and other ocean plastics since July 2019. And Ocean Legacy got a grant to basically build infrastructure at the landfill so that we can better divert and store the material. So it'll be ourselves at the West Coast landfill, as well as in Powell River. So we're the 2 pilot sites. And what they're hoping is that these will form sort of the basis or template for other areas across BC. So it's great because the funding comes from the federal government, and we've been partnering with them. We've diverted quite a bit of material already, and we hope to divert a lot more. So it's a very good news project.
Any other comments? Tim?
Hi, Jenny. Thank you for the report, and I appreciate. My name's Tom Steer. I'm a councillor with the district at Tofino, and with Josie Osborne on leave of absence, I'm her alternate. I just had a couple questions. I am getting up to speed on a lot of the what is happening with the ACRD, and I just had on one of the questions I had in terms of there is a tipping fee of approximately 120 a ton, I believe. And with Surfrider and some of the nonprofit organizations, are they incurring that fee as well when they're bringing in the recyclable plastics?
No, so Surfrider does all of the cleanups, and for any illegal dumping or cleanups of that nature, we do waive tipping fees, and specifically for those ocean plastics, which are, it's such a miscellaneous thing. I'm sure you've probably been involved in one of the cleanups. And so we sort of bag separately. We're really only charging the tipping fee for ocean netting and rope and like those cages for shellfish collection. So any of those materials, which typically are delivered by the companies that produce them. And it's actually a benefit to them because normally they would be paying $130 for us to landfill it. So we've set the tipping rate as 120 and we're diverting it and recycling it. So it's a benefit to them as well.
Thank you. And just one follow-up question in terms of the long-term intent of the program is this based on a cost recovery, or after the 5-year pilot project, is there any sort of sense of where we might be going in a long-term picture?
What we try to do with all of solid waste, especially for these diversion streams, is we try to make them self-supporting so that the cost of recycling is covered. And we do that with, say, drywall and mattresses and things like that. So we try to set the fee so that it covers that. The benefit with doing a pilot like this and having additional grant funding is that we're going to start to actually see what the real costs are. Ocean Legacy is doing something completely new because this is the most difficult plastic to recycle. It is covered in things. And so they've got some really neat research and development happening, but we don't know long-term what that's going to look like for costs and if they're going to be able to come up. Hopefully it will be a cost-effective way to do this, and maybe the tipping fee will stay around the same, but we'll have to consider that as we move forward.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, much appreciated. I read that report in depth, and extremely worthwhile project for sure. And thanks for that, Jenny. So the recommendation is that, would anybody like to make that recommendation?
Sure, I'll make them. I'll move that the West Coast Committee recommend that the Ocean Foundation for the Ocean Plastics Depot pilot project for the strategic collection and processing of abandoned, lost, and discarded fishing gear at the West Coast landfill for a term of 5 years, effective September 15th, 2020 to October 31st, 2025.
Seconder?
I'll
Anybody
second.
out there? Thank you. So carried. And item C, request for decision regards to West Coast Landfill Economic Analysis Report. And would that be you, Jenny, again? Thank you.
So through the chair, so maybe I will try and give maybe a little bit more background information for the new people joining us. So the landfill we started in 1980 was established, and we were required to follow the criteria and regulations. In 1993, they came up with the first set of landfill criteria. So that's from the ministry, and this sort of sets the way that we have to operate the landfill. And so we started doing the monitoring that was required, which resulted in saying that we need to treat the leachate. So in 2004 was when we basically designed and constructed the first leachate treatment. And what they were going for was a wetland treatment system. So at the landfill, what we do is we, all the water that falls onto the active landfill space, there's a perimeter ditch, it collects all that water, directs it into a lagoon, a large holding area. And then we pump that water up and it is sort of sprayed out into a field where so it's kind of like a spray irrigation onto vegetation. The idea being that the vegetation will uptake the nutrients, pollutants, and then nothing will leave the site. So since construction, there's been a lot of challenges, basically from the onset. So there's so much water and rainfall on the West Coast landfill that we have overflow events. The monitoring that we've been doing is showing that we're still having impacts outside of the landfill property, which is not the intention. So in 2007, in our solid waste management plan, I think it highlighted that we were out of compliance and we needed to look at this to see what we need to do to come into compliance. So do we upgrade the treatment system, or do we close the landfill and create a transfer station? Since that time, there was more improvements made. And then we've seen, more stringent landfill criteria come into place in 2016. And we were told that we had until 2020 to come up with a plan on how we were going to meet that. So in 2019, we did a landfill review. And the biggest point again was our leachate treatment system. And so following that review, we did a preliminary assessment with McGill, and we have just completed the economic assessment from Sperling Hansen. And so the key here was, okay, we can upgrade the treatment or we can transfer it. Let's just look at the costs. What are we looking at? And so if you've had a chance to look at the report, it is much more cost effective for us to operate the West Coast landfill. So that option looks like basically what we'll have to do is do some stormwater diversion. So we need to reduce the amount of water entering the treatment system to begin with. And then we need to upgrade the treatment system so that it is actually removing the pollutants effectively. So that's going to be a series of sort of aerated ponds and other technology. So that'll be the next step, would be coming up with the conceptual design for what is the specifics of the treatment. We've estimated that that's probably, in comparison to other landfills of the size, relatively speaking, about $2.5 million. We've got other big capital projects that will have to happen in order for us to basically operate the landfill to the end of its life. And so it's not a cheap endeavor. It's going to be very costly to operate the landfill properly. However, we also looked at the cost to transfer. So we would have to close the landfill. So there's similar costs involved in that, because if we operate the landfill to the end of its life expectancy, we have to close it. Well, if we're closing it now, we're still doing those costs. We would have to establish a transfer station, which still requires someone to be on site and the scale operator. So we still have a lot of operational costs, even with a transfer station. And then we have hauling costs added to that. And then we also have to pay for the Alberni Valley landfill operational costs, because for every ton of waste that we're moving from the West Coast to the Alberni Valley landfill, we have to pay for the Alberni Valley landfill to basically process that waste. So the cost difference is a lot. We have $120 if we upgrade the leachate system and operate the West Coast landfill properly, but it's $220 if we choose to transfer. We also looked at the greenhouse gases, and essentially, as far as the solid waste is concerned, whether we're landfilling it in the West Coast landfill or at the Alberni Valley landfill, the organic material that enters the landfill will break down and create methane. The difference with the transfer is we do have some additional greenhouse gases due to transportation, right? The trucking costs or the trucking gases. They're much, much less than methane. Methane is so much higher than carbon dioxide. But we also assume that if the waste is transferred to the Alberni Valley landfill, that a gas collection system would be in place. But we could be looking at a gas collection system at the West Coast landfill, probably a passive collection system anyhow. So I think as far as greenhouse gases is concerned, we're, depending if we install gas collection or not, it's a little bit higher with the transportation of waste. So that's the economic and greenhouse gas. The other thing is the logistics and the challenges in general of moving waste. So we have an established landfill that is in place, which is good. We just need to make sure that it's operating to meet all of the requirements. But if we're looking at doing something other than that, so if we're transferring waste, then there's a lot of issues with that. So is there going to be concern about the additional traffic? If we take it to the Alberni Valley landfill, we have a lot of consultation to do and consider for that. One of our complications is that we don't have a current tenure with the Alberni Valley landfill. And even if we did, we still, again, would have to work with our stakeholders in that area to be okay with importing waste. So we're not even sure if that would be a guaranteed option for us. Potentially, it would be barging or taking it somewhere that isn't the West Coast landfill. So there's a lot of complications involved in this. What I'm recommending in the report is that we move forward with upgrading the leachate treatment system. It's the most cost effective. It's relatively straightforward. One of our challenges will be a bit of funding and determining how we can fund that. But we think that there's a possibility, because under our solid waste management plan, which is approved by the minister, that we might be able to have borrowing capacity. We might be able to go to borrowing without getting electoral approval. So we're recommending that we move forward with conceptual design, which will give us a little more detail on what that treatment will actually look like, and then what the real costs will be. And we can then look at how we fund and move forward with that project.
Okay, well, thank you for that, Jenny. Any other comments? Anybody? Tom?
Thank you. Thank you once again. I appreciate the report, and I hate to admit, but I love landfill stuff. I spent a lot of time out in that area. So it's a passionate project. That being said, I did have a few just in generalized questions, and then something maybe more specific about the alternative approval process that may eventually come down the road. And some of the issues that had come out quite clearly to me is the costs that were projected, and right away I am supportive of the recommendation from staff. I just had questions around certain things, like in terms of the transfer fees to Port Alberni landfill. It was estimated at about approximately $90 a ton, which would bring it up to that 220 level. How is that $90 a ton transfer fee calculated? Just so that I have an understanding of how that actually works.
Through the chair. Yeah, that's a really good question. So similarly to calculating out that $120, what we need to do is for the Alberni Valley landfill, we look at our, we have some fixed costs, right? So we have to close the landfill, which means putting a liner on it and covering it, putting in gas collection, those things that have been in our operation design and closure plan. We also have to do a post-closure for a number of years, about 100 years, and we have an estimated cost on what that's going to cost. And then we know basically how much it costs to operate the landfill at the Alberni Valley, because we have our operating contract, so we've got equipment running and all of those things. And then any capital upgrades or renewal that we need to do. So we basically, plan out our entire expenses up until we close it, and we project how much tonnage we're going to be receiving, and then we divide that by a per tonnage basis, so that as the waste comes on the site, it pays its equal portion of the entire cost of operating the landfill.
Thank you. One of the other was that had come up was the passive collection of the methane that would be produced. And that is one component of reducing, as I'm sure you're well aware, reducing from methane. And then if we flared it off and burnt it, that we would reduce it to a less volatile GHG. The one question I had was, I would strongly support having a passive collection system. And I'm assuming that any other collection, we just don't have the volume there to make any more significant contribution to that in terms of recovering that methane for a usable. I'm assuming that it's just, we don't have the volume and just would be very cost prohibitive. I'm assuming that. So I would strongly recommend that within that recommendation is that we do include that it would be a passive collection and flaring system. As we all know, climate change is a dominant issue in our region. And I would just like to see maybe some of that language included somewhere in the recommendation. And the other, and then at the very end is, you had talked about the potential for an alternative approval process. We will have to go out to Borough, obviously. And Tofino has recently, in an alternative approval process for our transit, it became a bit of an issue in terms of transparency, in terms of communication. I would say would be the biggest issue that came out of that, and an understanding of why we went to that process. And the maybe it was felt that there was a lack of consultation, although there was a very long process through.
Well, you finished.
Okay, and so I just would, if we are going to start thinking about that we start putting in place a very comprehensive communication plan to address some of those issues that had arisen the last time we went to an alternative approval process.
Mr. Chair, so we absolutely hear the message on the communications element about whatever method the board employs to approve borrowing, if that's the way this proceeds. As Jenny mentioned, we would, if this gets recommended to the board and the board adopts it, we would then do our investigation as to what are the possible methods to go forward. One of them could be an AAP or a formal referendum, but another opportunity might be using the authority that the board may get from an adopted solid waste management plan to use that as the authority to borrow, in which case wouldn't have to go to the electorate again. In any event, we hear the board loud and clear about the need to communicate with what it is we're doing, why it is we're doing what we're doing, et cetera. And the board, of course, when they receive the report and recommendations in future, can certainly direct any particular and especially important points from their perspective on what needs to get communicated and how it needs to get communicated. Yeah.
And inclusive of that, and I know some of the issues that arise is that there's a proportional payment, so that quite often it will be a proportionally higher amount that is indicated. Sometimes I don't think the electorate here understand why that is, and as part of that communication, to have that embedded maybe in that communication.
We can definitely make comments about how the costs get apportioned. Unless there's any peculiarities in terms of peculiarities, I mean unusual or different from the default provisions. A householder in Tofino would pay the same as a householder in Long Beach, would pay the same as a householder in Ucluelet, for example, if they have the same assessment base. So we can, this is always a conversation that comes up. So we will take some steps to update and repurpose the types of communications we've had in that regard, and again, make sure that it meets the board's needs.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. I just want to include with regards to greenhouse gases and methane, hopefully with the new recycling program, the green waste that's going to happen, it's going to help to reduce that considerably. A really good report that I read on that, and so I really think we're moving forward quite nicely. So it's excellent. Do I have a mover?
Did we want to, can we amend the recommendation with the collective passive collection, or is that something we do now? Or
I would defer maybe I usually defer to Elise, but as to the proper, I did actually, and thank you for, I did also within there, and this was just another question when in the recommendation it was, and it's my understanding it's the leachate collection and treatment system, but is it also inclusive of the expansion of the landfill, or is this motion specific to the leachate collection and treatment?
Through the chair, in our budget that we have allocated already, we have $45,000. That's going to work on the conceptual design for leachate treatment specifically. Okay. We do update our design operation and closure plan, which also is when we would probably look at more specifically what our gas collection plans are going to be. Doesn't mean that we can't include that in this recommendation or as a recommendation, but that would be the point at which we would start to look into detail at that.
Great, thank you, Jenny.
Are there any other comments? Okay, hearing none. Tom, would you like to make that recommendation?
Sure, that the West Coast Committee recommend that the ACRD Board of Directors continue to operate the West Coast landfill and proceed with the design of leachate collection and treatment system upgrades required.
Seconder?
I'll second.
Thank you. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. Appreciate that, Jenny. On to reports. The first one I think is unauthorized camping, and I think director. Mr. Holmes, would you like to carry on with that? Thank you.
Certainly. I am grateful for the work that Mike Erg and others has done in sort of getting documents marshaled to this agenda, and also very much for my peers at Unauthorized government and Tofino and Ucluelet and Parks Canada and BC Parks. So there's been quite a contribution here, and we've had a number of conversations over Zoom calls in trying to understand the whole array of problems that have arisen due to unauthorized camping, and also for the purpose of identifying what some of the solutions might be, either regulatory or possibly even providing additional campsites to accommodate people who want to come and camp here in excess of what exists as legitimate camping spots now. So this is the beginning of a conversation. I would observe that under the regional district system, the board has not adopted a service establishment bylaw for the purposes of this endeavor, but we did think it was important to really start the conversation and then see what the will of the parties was. This is really aimed at 2021. What I would also observe too is it's not just a West Coast phenomenon, it's also happening in the Alberni Valley. And I expect, in particular, when the road improves out to Banfield, it will be a problem out there as well over time. But we are focusing on 2021 with respect to a year that we still expect will be under COVID conditions, which means that without international travel, people still have the interest of getting out of their usual surroundings and doing a little bit of travel within their home province or within their home country. And so we expect, again, for this to show up in subsequent years. So, Mr. Chair, I don't know if it might be worthwhile to hear from some of the stakeholders who are participating on this call. So, for example, from Parks Canada and from the various stakeholder groups, including treaty nations, non-treaty nations, and member municipalities. And just to hear sort of maybe some of the experiences in addition to what has been sent out here, or as a summary of what's been sent out here. And then the committee could consider some of this information and if it's the will of this committee, make a recommendation to the board as to what they figure next steps ought to be, including simply bringing back a more fulsome summary to a subsequent West Coast committee to really get something a little bit more succinct. Right now, what we have is a series of emails that have come in, and you'll hear a little bit further information today. And that could be a next step as well. It's just to have this on the next West Coast Committee agenda with a further summarizing of the details, including possibly more specific mapping. So with that, Mr. Chair, if you're happy with that idea, it might be worth going around to the various stakeholders to hear what their experiences have been on this campus. Yeah,
absolutely. I agree with that. I just finished reviewing the report a second time, and it's quite disturbing. In fact, when I traveled here today on the Barkley Main, there's a couple of spots where old quarries are, and there's an old camper that's been torn apart, I guess, and left there, and it's not in really good shape, and it doesn't bode well for the First Nations community or any of the other residents out there. But I'd really like to hear from the superintendent of the Pacific Rim National Park, Karen. I've read some of the information that's in that report with regards to that area, and I'd like to hear from you. So if you don't mind chiming in and filling us in a little bit on your comments.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I had my team get together. This has been an ongoing issue in our park, as right when we open our gates early in the morning, they come flooding in and they stay within our day use areas pretty much the whole day. So they are using all of the facilities. I think we put a few pictures in the report of the amount of garbage that they're leaving within the park. I know we've had some issues with PRVC and the amount of garbage being dumped there as well. So they're leaving their garbage. They're staying all day and night. So right from the time the gates open to when the commissioners have to kick them out at 11:30 at night. They're using all of the facilities. They're getting pretty aggressive. They've been aggressive to our coastal stewards that have talked to them, to other visitors. We've had some complaints from visitors asking us to remove them. They're overusing the facilities in the sense of not only the garbage, but they're doing their dishes in the washrooms, which makes it unbearable for people to go use the washrooms. We tried to ensure that only 3 people would be in our facilities at a time. That didn't work. Usually they go in groups, so there'd be 6, 7 of them in the facilities at a time. They've jammed our sewer system quite a bit by flushing and discarding many contaminants down the sewer system. I know we didn't put in there, but we've had some drug items going down the system. So it's been a huge challenge, to say the least. Mr. Chair, it's one that's probably increased more than we've seen in previous years. The law enforcement team, the visitor safety team, wildlife team, and my VE team worked around the clock, including the commissioners at night, to try and combat this situation. But it really increased in August. I would say August was our busiest month, and we had a lot of interactions between visitors, illegal campers, and community members. So 3 very different groups, and they were all coming to a clash in our parking lots. So it is something that we would love to work with the region on, to figure out an approach of providing education and prevention, or getting messages out there about protecting and being good hosts as they come to the area. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I totally appreciate that. Thanks, Karen. I think one of the biggest issues for me personally is the disrespect that these people are showing for the environment, and also for the people that live in the area and commune with nature. We've talked about the West Main and the issues in there that travel through the back and through the provincial parks. They've noted some real issues in there as well. And people driving through there just to recreate are coming upon large groups that are defecating and creating real issues. So, I think this is something that we really have to concentrate on. And as Mr. Holmes suggested, that we carry this on to the next West Coast Committee meeting. But I would also like, if we can, through you, sir, to form a working group with representatives from all the communities. And I know that there's issues as well out towards Ucluelethat and also towards Tokort Bay. And I don't know if Kirsten has any comments on that at all, if they've had any serious issues. But I'm finding that the back roads, no matter where they are in forestry and in Indigenous lands, are being utilized with a lot of disrespect. So do you have any comment on that at all, Kirsten?
Yeah, there's been many people just camping on the sides of the roads. There was a camper, something was left, and then a week later it was burnt. Accidents happening. There was a fatality because people just are driving like it's the Wild West. A lot of issues. Yeah,
understandable. Anyway, through Mr. Holmes, maybe staff can try to put something together so that we can get the various groups, Indigenous and representatives from the regional district, from Tofino and Ucluelet, and maybe have another meeting prior to our next West Coast Committee meeting. Would that suit?
Yep, we can certainly do that.
Okay, I appreciate it. I appreciate everybody's input on this serious issue, and we certainly don't want to have to. We want to have something in place for next year. Tom?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just a couple of comments. Obviously, this year, this issue has been around for many years, and this year, for multiple of factors, COVID not being junior in that, but the issues that have come up and the solutions that are that potentially are there have been talked about in many ways. And one of the things that first comes up in many of my thoughts is how we allocate resources towards that. And so often, whether it be at the municipal level or at the regional district, we are limited in our capacity and resources. So one of the recommendations I would like to accompany that is that we actually have it into the budget process as well through the ACRD. And I'm not sure where you're at with that, but that would be inclusive in those conversations, because we can come up with as many solutions as we would like, but they also have to be resourced. And one of the areas that I suspect we'll be able to accommodate that is within the budget process. And one of the things that I've encountered with COVID, and we've had couple of task forces, is when we do convene a working group such as you're proposing, is that we are very definitive in what it is that we are looking to answer, and that we have a terms of reference that is very clear and articulate as to what we hope to accomplish with this. I find that goes a long way in terms of establishing the group and the content that we will be discussing. So those would be my two recommendations moving forward if we would approve a working group of that nature.
Absolutely, yeah, much appreciated. Yeah, and I think when we form a working group, inclusive of that should be the Ministry of Forests. And I don't know if highways would be part of it or not, but all of the communities involved in these areas. And I'm sure that it's happening elsewhere in the province as well, not just here in the island, but certainly this seems to be, for us anyway, really a critical issue. So, and thank you for that. So the motion is that the West Coast Committee recommend that, or I should say, we accept this report from Mr. Holmes on,
Sorry, Cal, I just wanted to,
Yeah.
I think it would also behoove us, as it did for some of the messaging that we've been sending out as West Coast communities with the COVID messaging and how we've kind of combined our efforts to be sending the same message,
Yeah.
that when this committee, this working group comes together, that we consider part of the messaging being something that is a blanket, that we're sending the same, that become part of what we look at as well.
Okay, yeah. Tom?
Yeah, just to further add, thank you, Rochelle. I think that's an excellent point. And one of the things that is some of the stakeholders that I refer to that be encompassed in that, and some of that messaging comes through a few of our organizations, such as our DMO here, Tourism Tofino, Tourism Ucluelet, and that kind of message, consistent messaging throughout our region would be valuable. So in terms of the composition of the proposed working group, I think there should be obviously some serious thought into how it could be composed, and that so it is the most effective working group that we can put.
Yeah, absolutely. All right.
I won't interrupt again.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, I won't interrupt again. You can get back to you.
You're more than welcome. So yeah, I think that this report in depth is really shows a lot of the restrictions and things that the issues that we have here on the West Coast and throughout it. So I'm quite happy to receive that report. Do we have a seconder?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor? Thank you. Moved. The next report is an update on logging at the LBA under 2021 sale of log contract to the Sand Group. Mr. Fortune.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Just a report an update on our process. The logging we conducted at the airport is basically log salvage. The wood we cut down was for our approach surfaces. So we've incurred that cost earlier in the year, and now we've gone in with the contract with the Sand Group, and we've removed the vegetation that we cut down for the approach surfaces for the runways. And we also did a thorough search for all of the wood that the military left behind when they cut the forest down originally. So we had an estimated volume of about 1,860 cubic meters, and we ended up salvaging approximately 2,750 actual cubic meters up from the site. A lot of that is old growth cedar. And so we're going to have a net increase of approximately $199,000 to the project, which will go into reserve fund.
Very good, very good.
One issue we've had, we had taken down a substantial amount of alder along the road right of way. For various reasons, that was left on the ground too long for the log buyer to have it viable. So I still have to deal with that wood. The sand group has had to pay for that wood because it was decked as part of their contract. The wood they left on the ground, they'd have to pay for. But we still have to remove the fiber from that site. So we're still working on that. But overall, it's been a very successful project.
Well, thank you for that.
I just have one quick question there, Mark.
Yep.
In terms of the reserve, what is the reserve fund that is allocated to? Is it a specific?
I'll go into capital projects,
Capital.
future capital projects, which.
Yeah. Thank you.
Maybe the Long Beach Airport could get a massive chipper and have a whole bunch of alder chipping for smoking. It could become a new thing. Just,
Possibility.
right?
It's a possibility.
Tons of alder.
Tons of older chips, yes.
All right. Motion to accept that.
I'll move it.
Thank you. Seconded. Thank you, Tom. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. And that moves us to item C, which is a donation of mixed fiber from the Long Beach Airport to support salmon enhancement. Mr. Fortune, maybe that's something that, I don't know if those alder logs would suit or not.
No, Central West Coast Forest Society prefer cedar for the longevity in their stream projects. We tried to offer them some alder, but they declined.
They're onto it.
So as part of the harvesting project and salvaging project, there was a lot of non-merchantable timber that was on the site. We had the contractor bring that in because we'd already been talking with Central West Coast and they would be able to use that material on some of their stream rehabilitation projects. We approximately spent about 10 hours of machine time bringing the material in and loading it into bin trucks for that organization. And you can see some of their work on the Hydro Hill East Creek network. All the wood that you see, if you turn that corner, all of that wood on that creek is actually from the airport. And they've also been able to stockpile some of that material for future projects. So they were very appreciative of us being able to offer up that material for them. They would otherwise we'd have to deal with it from a landscaping perspective.
Yeah.
Cost for that was approximately $2,750 that the airport paid for the removal from our land and loading in the trucks. So that was a contribution that we put toward Central West Coast Forest Society.
Very good. Yeah, I've noticed that on Hydro Hill West as well. And they've done a lot of remediation work in there and it's really, really nice to see. So thank you for that. Motion to accept.
So moved.
Thanks, Tom. All those in favor? Thank you. And finally, under reports, item D, the award of British Columbia Air Access Program CYAZ Fire Flow Upgrade Project. Mr. Fortune.
Yes, through the chair. Once again, this is a project that we applied for in 2019. We were denied at that time, reapplied for 2020 with some improved numbers for our site, and we were successful. Due to COVID, we would usually have an award announcement basically in May, and we didn't get it until just recently. That being said, it's a 6% grant from the provincial government. And instead of the standard BCAP process, we will be getting that money upfront as a lump sum to deal with. So it'll be just a drop for us.
No, right.
What that does, our current, it's a known deficiency at the airport. We have approximately 5 liters a second, which works out to be about 70 imperial gallons a minute for our fire flow requirements, way under what we're required to have. have, the fire memory survey. So we're supposed to have upwards of 15 to 1,600 imperial gallons a minute. So that works out to be 120 liters a second. We're nowhere close to meeting that. And that is to protect, for our local fire departments, the water supply for 2-hour firefighting time to deal with a structure fire on an aircraft hangar. So having this grant funding from the province is going to basically replace all our water mains on the industrial side of the airport to a 10-inch plastic main. It'll also set up our booster pumps so we can actually have fire flows at the pump station to support that fire flow. So it's a huge step for the build out of the airport for not only now to meet our deficiencies, but in the future for future development on the site.
10-inch main, that's a lot of water.
The fire flow requirements for aircraft hangars are one of the highest. So we were nowhere close to our requirements with the existing system, which was put in by Transport Canada back in the 1960s.
Does the airport get backup from other, like from Tofino Fire? And
We have a mutual aid agreement between Tofino and Ucluelet Fire. It's an automatic aid agreement. So if we have a call from the airport lands, both jurisdictions will supply equipment onto the site.
Good to hear. Good to hear. Thank you for that. So the recommendation is that the West Coast Committee receive all of these reports. We've done the first 3 already. So all those in favor? Seconded? Thank you. Carried. Is there any late business from staff or anybody else? No? Okay, thank you for that. Question period. Are questions or comments from the public participating in the Zoom meeting? Is there anything there?
Yes, there was one question from Penny Coate who asked about the camping on back roads and whether that occupation is continuing into the fall or whether they have left. And the reason that she was asking was that she noticed that there had been a large occupation of people near Sprout Lake that was continuing into the fall months. And she wanted to know if that was happening here as well.
Yes. Well, I mean, there certainly are still people out there, and I believe that a lot of it has to do with mushroom collecting and some of the issues that have been brought up in the past that I've read in this report as well is that they are not harvesting the mushrooms correctly. They're digging them up instead of cutting them off. And that has real detriment to the mycelium level in the forest floors. So in answer to Penny's question, the answer is yes, it is happening. And again, it's going to be something that we are going to have to address, I believe, in the future with regards to our next committee meeting that we have. So thank you. Thank you for that, Penny. Appreciate it.
Especially with the continuation of spurts of lovely weather like this. I think people's tolerance of outdoor living is heightened.
Are there any other questions?
No.
Mr. Chair, I should also note that we still have open the email address for people to provide input on the meeting today. And there was no public comments or input received.
Thank you for that. Okay, I guess the next item is
8.
Pardon?
Number 8.
Number 8. Motion to adjourn.
I'll move the motion to adjourn.
Oh, thank you for that. Seconded, Mr. Steer. All those in favor? Thank you for that.